Welcome back to Unbreakable Alliances, trust, communication, and recruiting spies for the FBI, where we dive into building trust-based relationships that transform your life. I'm Dreeke, retired FBI agent and behavioral analyst, here to share insights from my book, Unbreakable Alliances. Last time we explored the power of allies, and today we're going to dive into trust, building it, keeping it. Trust is the foundation of any alliance, and I'm excited to answer some questions you might have about building and maintaining it. So let's get started. All right, so let's get started with a big one. Robin, why is trust so crucial for alliances, and how did I see this in the FBI? I never really considered trust until this one pivotal moment. Many years ago, I was working at the Counterintelligence Training Center, and this was after years of working counterintelligence in New York City. That's where I really cut my teeth working in confidential human sources and recruiting Russian intelligence officers, or attempting to, at the United Nations. That's when I also got in the behavioral analysis program as a team member. From there, I went to Norfolk, Virginia to work counterintelligence down there. Then I went up to FBI headquarters, and from FBI headquarters, I went to Quantico. I was teaching at the Counterintelligence Training Center. And I was one of the team members that helped run our introduction operations course, as well as in charge of our recruitment course. During this time period, a very good friend and mentor of mine, Joe Navarro, is one of the world-renowned experts on nonverbal behavior, and he also happened to be a founder of my behavioral analysis program that I was a team member on. As I've mentioned numerous times before, he was always very much publish. If you have at least one bit of information another human being could benefit from, shame on you for not getting to them. I was encouraged to do that. I had never ventured into the area of writing before because, like many people, my experiences in writing were really in high school and at the Naval Academy, where I had many people tell me what a horrible writer I was. I'll never forget, I had a paper in high school that my English teacher took a red pen to, and you couldn't even see my words anymore. It was all marked up and horrendous. She said, "You'll never be a great writer." And so it's bone crushing, right? And that's during the formative years of our lives or our life arcs. I stayed away from it for a number of years, and I was really scared because we fear being judged by others. And so we avoid things where we think we're going to be judged negatively. Fast forward to my time at Quantico. I was now teaching this stuff and literally having to get in the mind of how to develop curriculum and information, this subjective art form that I'd learned from my Jedi Masters and passing it along. And so you have to be very articulate. You have to take an art form and make it a linear paint by number. And so I got better at understanding the behaviors that were going behind recruiting sources, recruiting people, interviewing. I was having lots of deep dive reps of interacting with human beings and seeing cause and effects of all these behaviors, both as an operator in the field for years, and also now as an instructor trying to pass on that knowledge to others. What had happened was I had done a couple articles for the Law Enforcement Bulletin, a peer-reviewed journal inside law enforcement. Joe had encouraged me to write and start doing articles for them. So I'd done a few, and they did pretty well. On source development and relationship building and communication, the Law Enforcement Bulletin came to me and asked me to do an article on counterintelligence. At this time, I had moved on from being a primary instructor at the training center. I'd also then taken on the role of the chief of the behavioral analysis program. I took over the team, and we were doing about 100 assessments a year across the country. I was helping case agents, bringing in team members, our operational psychs, and we were strategizing all these great operations across the Bureau. I loved that team. These are the most altruistic, beautiful human beings that put aside their own cases, their own lives, their own egos and vanities to solely focus and put all their energy in helping another case agent be successful at doing the righteous work to protect our country. That's what great human beings these were. I really wanted to do an article on the team because I was so grateful to be part of the team, to be the one to carry that football down the field to the next person that's going to take it over. I said, let me do an article on what my team does, because I can do that without compromising national security. I can talk about a resource that we have inside the Bureau for counterintelligence operations that's behavior-based. And that's the first time I actually took that step back and said, what do we actually do? Now, here's what we actually did. A case agent would contact me or my coworker and ask us, hey, we have this case. We'd love to have you come in and do a consultation. I would then assemble a team of at least 3 other case agents from the team that had expertise relevant to this case. I'd bring in one of these operational psychs, some world-renowned psychologists that were very, very good. And we listen to a case agent, present their case, present the individual they're going to be trying to communicate with, whether it's an interview strategy, recruitment strategy, double agent operation, espionage and investigation. And we would put together, after we put our heads together, and all the behavioral observations, all the human factors involved here, and put together a strategy for the case agent. And I said to myself, what exactly are we doing? What forces a pragmatic, very objective viewpoint on what's the process and procedure here? And that's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. All of a sudden, I realized that every single case I had ever strategized for the behavioral team, every single case and operation I strategized for myself, every source meeting, every recruitment operation, every interaction with my management, my surveillance teams, my lookouts, my squad mates, all I was ever doing and the team was ever doing was strategizing trust. When you give a label and meaning to things, now all of a sudden everything falls into place. All of a sudden when I realized everything in life came down to strategizing trust with another human being, everything became so obvious. And when I took that next step back and said, all right, so this is what we're doing. We're strategizing trust. What exactly are we doing? What's our process? And that's where I came up with the Code of Trust. And so that was the birth of why trust was the foundation of everything I moved forward with from that point. Here's a question I love. Robin, how does rapport build trust, and what's an example from your spy days? Simple answer to this is rapport is the foundation of trust. For me, it's an evolution. I've written 4 books on the topic of human engagement and communication. The very first one was called It's Not All About Me, the Top 10 Techniques for Quick Rapport with Anyone. Rapport is what happens in the first microseconds and seconds of every interaction. How you handle those first couple seconds is how that arc of the relationship is going to start. That's where it starts. The challenge of it was going through New Agent training. They were very big on talking about developing rapport before the interview starts, at the beginning of the interview, then do this. And a lot of times it became what we call assumed knowledge. Like build rapport, then hit them with this question. But no one actually dove deep on how to develop rapport. What they would say is just notice some things on the desk. Make a comment if you see a photo of a family. Make a comment if you see a photo of someone on vacation. If they're wearing a nice necklace, really surface level flattery, which can come across creepy or fall flat or become extremely obvious. And when you're dealing with individuals that have no need to talk to you, and you're dealing with people that are more mature, they don't want to waste their time. If you can't hit them right off the bat with what's in it for them and engage them in a way that is of benefit to them in some way, you're not going to go anywhere. Rapport is part of that. One of my great friends often says you have to answer 3 critical questions on a first contact with any human being. Who you are, what you want, and when you're leaving. And when you can wrap that around what I call a non-judgmental validation of a specific priority, objective, or observation of something going on with their life, that is where rapport starts. And so it's that non-judgmental specific observation that you're going to see. So it can't be surface and flattery. It's got to be a little bit deeper. One of the things you can always validate is someone's time if you don't know much about them. But you really want to do a little bit deeper of a hit here. A great example of one of the first times I really dove deep needing to develop rapport, and this was with an individual. This is actually after 9/11s. And we were tasked with not talking to our regular competent human sources. We kind of had to shift our focus to the Middle East at the time, and my sources were focused on Russia. But I did have one Russian source that was very good and had lots of relationships in a myriad of different areas. He did find an individual who had ties to a leader of a Middle Eastern country. I wrote about him in the book Sizing People Up and also in Unbreakable Alliances. This individual was deeply connected, but he had no reason to have a conversation with me. My friend, the competent human source that introduced us, identified a critical need and priority in Anand's life that I could resolve for him and be a resource for. That's how the introduction was made. At that first meeting where my source introduced Anand to me, there was a reason to have a get-together. It wasn't just to have a cup of coffee because no one has the bandwidth or time for that. I was introduced as someone to be trusted that could solve this critical life challenge for him. And what happened next was, at this meeting, I asked a very specific question because I'm always curious about someone's life arc. And if you can identify things from someone's background, a taste, a smell, music, something that triggers great dopamine and brain rewards, and you can link yourself to it, that can be a great moment. And I remember asking Anon, I said, do you have any favorite memories when you're growing up? And he goes, yes, I do. We used to sit together at this tea house and we'd have Kashmiri tea. I was like, Kashmiri tea? Tell me about Kashmiri tea. And he described this pink chai tea, and it's pink because it had pistachio in it and things like that. And he says milky, and it's just so good. And it's just because it was a great memory of chatting with my close relative. And it was just beautiful, beautiful moment. So I said, wow, that's a really neat experience. Thank you for sharing that. At the very next meeting, we're preparing to go to this next meeting. And I'm thinking, how can I continue to develop rapport by the information I had gleaned? And I said, well, what he mentioned was X, Y, and Z, some of these other things. And he mentioned Kashmiri tea. So I made it a mission to find and bring Kashmiri tea to the next meeting. It was a challenge because even in New York City, I could not find Kashmiri tea at any of the supermarkets, but I did find a small nook in the corner of a little supermarket, deep in Manhattan, I think. It was in one of those, kind of waxy soy milk like containers, and it said Kashmiri tea. So I bought 4 containers and brought them home, preparing to go to the meeting. I remember opened up one to experiment. My plan was this: we're going to meet at a hotel room. My plan is to bring my camp stove so I could heat the tea in the room. I got one of my wife's grandmother's China tea sets to bring with me to try to make it look nice. I open up this Kashmiri tea and I pour some out in a little mug to take a look at it and taste it. My new friend Anon had described it as pink chai tea. When I poured it out, it was lime green. I was like, what the hell am I going to do with this? It was a wrong color for my tea. But that's part of the experience I wanted him to have. I experimented with food dyes, and I was able to get some food dye in one and actually turn it pink. My friend John, who in my book, his name is Jesse Thorne, is helping me on this case for the first time. I'm kind of flipping roles here. So we go to the hotel room. We set up, we're in our nice suits. We're setting up the camp stove in the bathroom. These camps are the older ones with the propane container, little burner on top, and a teapot on top of that. It was stacked about a foot and a half high and unstable. I put it on the sink in the bathroom, and I gave John the stuff. I said, prepare this, make nice hot tea. Here's the tea set and everything. We had our suits on, nice white shirts. This is a high-level guy we're about to chat with, Anon. And I'm in the living room of the hotel room setting up some furniture for the chat we're going to have. And all of a sudden I hear a crash and a bam and a boom and a 4-letter expletive from John in the bathroom. For some reason, the teapot had fallen off. He had crashed it, and the red food dye in his hand went splatting all over the white towels and his shirt. It looked like he slaughtered an animal or a goat in there or something. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I said, dude, you got to figure out something. You got to fix this and make the tea right. I got to go downstairs and get Ann. And so I go downstairs, and this is literally the second meeting with Ann. And I said, hey, nice to meet you again, Ann. And I'm going to bring you upstairs, and I apologize. We tried to do something special for you, but things kind of went awry in the room, and he's giving me one of those skeptical looks. So we get back upstairs, and I do a little secret knock on the door, and John opens the door holding the tea set, and he's got the red food dye all over him. And he's got the pink chai, the Kashmiri tea, sitting in little cups for him. And I just looked at Anon, I looked at John and said, here you go. We made you some tea for the meeting. And he goes, you did all this for me? I said, yeah, well, we tried. And he laughed, and so did we. From that moment on, we were bonded. It was really a great bonding moment. We were doing some really righteous work together. We both overlapped our priorities. We're talking in terms of what his challenges were, how we could be a resource to facilitate things that he thought were important, and likewise for us. To this day, I am still in touch with him and his family. A very good human being that has done amazingly good things for the world at large in our national security. But anyway, that is how I used rapport in my very first, not first operation, but probably the most critical at that time. All right. I often get asked, Robin, how can active listening create real connections, and how do I do it? Active listening is a lot of actions that help build trust, build rapport and connections. There's some simple things to do when active listening. You want to paraphrase back what the other person is saying. You want to acknowledge them non-verbally by head tilting the same way, smiling and nodding when they're talking, encourage them to speak more. Use your non-verbals encouragingly. Those are fantastic insights on using active listening and its power. When you're actively listening, you are demonstrating to the other person that you see them, that you value them, and you're encouraging them to speak more because you're not judging what's coming out of their mouths. It's fantastic. I'm going to chat with you about how to take that methodology and bring it at an even higher level. Throughout everything we've been sharing so far, and we're going to continue to share in this podcast series, I want you to think in terms of how can I keep the focus on them? Make it about them. So even when describing what I just did with active listening, I was telling you things you have to do to be an active listener, which are fantastic and great. The challenge is that if you're thinking about what you have to do, you're not paying attention 100% to what they're saying. So here's what I'm going to do for you. Continue to get reps in with active listening from all the other great courses and books you've heard on active listening. And at the same time, challenge yourself with this. Don't try to active listen. In other words, do not think about your agenda of what you have to do to be an active listener. What I want you to do is to be completely present for what they're saying. By being present and hearing what they're saying and being interested in that, free of an agenda of what you need to say, the way to make it about them and be a fantastic active listener is to pay attention to what they're saying. Be curious about all the nooks and crannies of the data points they're giving you and explore those. Ask a follow-up question about something they said. That's active listening. Not active listening is them stating something, you completely ignoring it or making a jump to another topic. What I'm saying to do is pay attention to what they're saying, follow up with a question about what it is they said. Now your question could start aligning down a path that you want to go down together. Active listening also includes the nonverbals we want to display. Just be present with them. You're going to naturally match their tempo. I'm so big on tempo matching, and some people will call it mirroring. Some of my great friends will also say, if you're intentionally mirroring, who's the focus on? It's on me. If you're trying to mirror someone, the typical one people try to do is, hey, if someone's tilting their head to one side, tilt your head to the same side. And then if you think you have rapport, try to tilt your head, see if they follow you. And then you kind of do this little game back and forth. If they catch you mirroring, you are done with rapport. You're done with trust. They now think you're trying to manipulate them or at least mock them in some way. I am all about the matching of the tempo. Now, if you're deeply present in the moment with that other person, free of that agenda, and just paying attention with that active curiosity to what they're saying, your tempos are going to match. The easy way to match is just go slower. You're in no rush. We have an expression in aviation. I'm a pilot. My son's a Marine Corps pilot, and there's a simple expression, no emergency takeoffs. Because every emergency takeoff will undoubtedly cause an emergency landing. Same thing when you're speaking. No emergency takeoffs with what comes out of your mouth. Take a breath, take a moment, and pause, then ask that question about what is they said. That, to me, is a higher level of active listening. Start with those reps on that lower level and move up to letting go of thinking about what you have to do and paying attention to what they're sharing. All right. Continuing on the same vein, here's another one. Robin, how do nonverbal cues help build trust in daily life? I am a huge proponent of tempo matching, but I want to cover a couple of really basic ones. I started out my career on the behavioral analysis program, deep diving on nonverbals, because my mentors, Joe Navarro and Jack Schaefer, two of the greatest nonverbal experts in the world. If you want a deeper dive on nonverbal behavior, pick up Joe's book, What Everybody is Saying. Fantastic read, international bestseller. And when it comes to the world of elicitation and interviewing strategies and techniques, his longtime partner and team member, Jack Schaefer, wrote two phenomenal books on the topic. The first is The Like Switch, and the second was called The Truth Detector. Jack's great turn of phrase is fantastic because elicitation is inspiring someone to share information before they have an opportunity to lie to you. How do you get someone to tell you the truth before they have an opportunity to lie or deceive you? That's what elicitation is. Anyway, there's two great books and two great individuals. But when it comes to the other nonverbal cues, what people are looking for and the great way to continue down that rapport path and trust path is through the simple things from the chest up for me. As Joe Navarro will tell you, from the top of the head to the tip of the toes, the nonverbals are screaming at you. I was in the business of long-term communication, long-term rapport. It wasn't just one interview, it wasn't just a transactional relationship. I needed the longer-term ones. Here's the other thing too, you cannot multitask. Human beings, it is scientifically proven, and Tasha Eurich talks about it in her book called Insight. Simon Sinek talks about it in all his leadership books. We are not genetically and biologically coded. No matter how much someone tells you they're really good at multitasking, no human being can focus on more than one thing at a time. You can distract yourself with other things, but that one thing will not get your full attention and it will fall completely apart. I found when I was focusing on nonverbals, I was missing a lot of the content of the words they were sharing. If you have two people in an interview room, you have one person focusing on nonverbal behavior, and then you have another person focusing on the words they're saying, then you can confer together so you can focus on nonverbals. But as a solo human being, interacting with another human being, after a while, through my reps of what worked, what didn't work, I just chest up. I'm focusing on where the eyes are. And so what I want to do is I want to have great accommodating nonverbals, as Joe talks about. We basically put nonverbals into two camps. We have comfort nonverbals on one side, and we have stress nonverbals on the other. We want to both demonstrate high comfort, and we also want to inspire higher comfort from them. One way, as we've already described, is by good tempo matching. The other one we can always do is we can give the head tilt. So we expose in the carotid artery, saying to the world that, hey, we trust you not to rub the jugular out. It's called a ventral display. Anything that is up and out, high elevation ventral displays, palms up. This is saying, hey, I'm open to what you have to say. Eyebrow elevations, flashing, smiling, full facial smile. Dale Carnegie talks about that in his book, How Do You Win Friends and Influence People? One of those 6 things that Dale talks about is a genuine smile. And Jack Schaefer talks about this too, the difference between a genuine smile, which is a full facial. And how do you have a genuine smile? You have congruence between what your face is saying and what you're thinking. In other words, congruence of body and mind. If I say I'm happy to see you, I am lighting up inside. My eyebrows are flashing. I'm smiling. I got a good head tilt and my palms are up, and I'm engaging you with this great positive energy because I am congruent with mind and body. Now, people that are forcing their nonverbals and they're trying to force a smile, the smile is going to go straight back. It's going to kind of look like gritted teeth. And you're going to also be able to have a little bit of eyebrow compression out of elevation. It's hard to even do two things at the same time that are opposite. Why? Because if you're trying to force a smile, what's it saying internally? Not really happy to see you. And now what happens? The other person sees it incongruence between what you're trying to put out and what the emotion is. People pick up on creepy. That is creepy. So you want the high eyebrow elevation, big smiles, ventral displays, bodies, all these things that are up and out, as opposed to the stress nonverbals, eyebrow compression, lip compression, anything scrunching in. This says, I am not happy to see you. I am stressed about seeing you. Get away. Now I'm going to cover one other thing when it comes to nonverbals. I see photos of myself these days and I'm like, wow, Robin, when you're just sitting normally, listening and paying attention, you have resting angry face. Some people call it other things, but if you have a look about you, because I've had this question many times, Robin, what do I do? People have told me I have resting angry face. How do I overcome it? Well, if you can't overcome it, then what you can do is we can do a thing that I call negating the frame. So here's the frame. They're seeing this, but one way to negate it and shift it is to confront it face on at the very beginning. So at the very beginning of a meeting, when you're first meeting someone, say, hey, Robin, it's very nice to meet you. I'm excited about getting to know each other better. But before we get going, I want to let you know, some people said, and I apologize for this in advance, that I have resting angry face. If you see me sitting here looking like this, that's my face. I am deeply paying attention to what you're saying, but it's going to look a certain way. That is called negating the frame. You are telling the other person what to expect and what it actually is. You're defining it for them because there's nothing you can do about it. And also what is demonstrating from the first episode? Vulnerability. You're saying what you're not as good at, but you're saying what you're doing to mitigate it. That inspires great trust. And so that's how we can use nonverbals in a very simple manner to keep the focus on them, to display to the other person how I'm excited to see them. I have congruence. And more importantly, you can read the same in them. Are you making that connection? Are you inducing comfort or are you inducing stress? All right, here's another fun one. This comes up a lot. Robin, how do you overcome skepticism when building trust fast? I really like making what seemingly can be a really complicated, challenging question into really something very simple, harder to do because it requires us to overcome a lot of our own problems and challenges. That is, you want to overcome skepticism first. You always need to give, because this is my answer for many things, transparency, transparency, transparency. I get asked, aren't all these skills, tools, and tactics just used to manipulate people? How do you keep it from being manipulation? I said, that's easy. Just be transparent. Tell them exactly what you're doing, why you're doing it. I train and teach people how to build trust. And people say to me, Robin, you doing it to me now? I said, what? Using all the skills I just talked about to try to build a relationship and trust with you? Absolutely I am, because otherwise I might blow it and do really stupid things and make it all about me. And what's that? That's transparency with some vulnerability added in there. So I will always answer with transparency. Now, other ways for skepticism, very, very simple. Got to be consistent. Consistency demonstrates over time that you are what you say you are and you're not deviating from that. A lot of times I'll get told, Robin, you're a little too good to be true because you keep making it about me. If I am there to discover your challenges, resources, priorities, and pain points, and then I offer you resources or an introduction to someone that could be a resource for you, that might sound a little too good to be true because people are waiting for an ask. And I don't have an ask. Then on a second meeting, we get together and I follow up and say, hey, did that introduction work out well for you? They say, yeah, it worked out pretty good, or it didn't. I say, all right, let me know what else I might be able to do for you. Now they're still waiting for an ask. And after a while, when you don't have an ask, people then say, well, what do you need out of this relationship, Robin? I said, I don't really need anything. If you're curious, I can share some of my priorities and some challenges and focuses that I have that you might have resources for if you're interested. And so if they then feel inspired to reciprocate because I did a good job for them, great. If you're consistent with not throwing down a tit for tat right off the bat, if you're there to actually be a resource for them without that ask, that's one thing that's going to go a long way to overcome skepticism. And remember the 4 keys of communication. You empower them with choice. If that's something you're comfortable doing. If not, that's fine. I will still be a consistent resource for you to move on to X, Y, and Z. Now, if you don't have the bandwidth for that anymore, let them know. Say, listen, I have some priorities in this area. If you don't have the bandwidth or time to be a resource, no problem. But my boss says I got to move on to X, Y, and Z. I'd love to keep in touch, but I just can't read as much as we regularly have been. But again, just be transparent, be consistent. And the big thing is this, patience. You just got to be patient because people operate and do things at a much different tempo than you might. If you can articulate what the progress was at each meeting to the people around you, to your bosses, to your management, that's going to go a long way. So again, those 3 keys to overcoming skepticism are transparency, consistency, and patience. All right, how does focusing on others' need build trust? And can I share an example? Yeah, this one's pretty simple, actually. Remember, step 2 in the golden keys of communication is talk in terms of the other person's challenges, priorities, pain points, and friction points in life. Where did I learn that? Remember, the whole premise is moving on from being a problem solver for my problems and challenges, but learning how to do that for others. When you can solve and be a resource for other people's challenges and priorities in life, and they can trust you with their life, why wouldn't they align with you? I have multiple cases. There was not a confidential human source that I ever recruited or worked with that I wasn't first a resource for something going on in their life. Sometimes it was just having an open ear to listen to share their life's challenges and struggles with, where I was non-judgmental in their life. Other times it was they needed financial help. I had sources that needed help getting through college, and so they're making a little money on the side doing stuff for the U.S. government. And other times it was more critical life challenges. Probably different than what most people think or watch in James Bond or any of the other movies where you think people are motivated for money. They're betraying their country for money, a bag of diamonds or whatever silly things people think it is from social media or movies. The question is, what are they using those resources for? And I mean, you'll hear of, oh yeah, he got $1 million package or he defected for $5 million or something like that. What are they using that money for? Because that is the real crux of what they need the money for. There was not one operation or one recruitment operation case that education and the well-being of their kids was not at the forefront of the exact reason they did what they were doing. 100%. A lot of times it was political. They didn't happen to align with wanting the oligarch Putin to destroy their country any more than they already was. So there's all these other motivations in there as well. But at the forefront, it was kids. There was one fantastic human being that was cooperating that I wound up recruiting, not from Russia, but from one of the other former republics. And I remember he came on board because he didn't like how his country was aligning with Russia and wanted to do something about that. But number one was the education of his daughter. Before he was going to go back to his own country, his daughter was going to stay here in our country. He wanted to introduce me, not as FBI, but as a resource in her life, a lifeline, just in case something happened. She had someone he could trust that she could reach out to that could help her, especially because she was going to college. And, this is what dads do when you are caring for your kids. That was a game changer. I remember I had to get massive permissions, not just from the FBI, but from the CIA as well, because it was a joint case, to even see another family member. These are people doing high-end defecting, betraying country stuff. If I wasn't willing to do that for him, he didn't say, Robin, if I don't get $1 million, I'm not working with you anymore. I said, Robin, if you can't do this for me and take care of my daughter, I don't think we can have a relationship. You see, that is actually a priority. That is what motivates people. So our job every day is to understand what those challenges, priorities, and pain points are and what we're going to be able to offer in terms of those things. All right, here's a key question that many people are getting tasked with figuring out these days, and that is, Robin, how does credibility keep trust strong, and how do we build it? Credibility, it is another foundational bedrock for trust, and here's why. Because if you're not credible, who's going to want to work with you? You can identify all the challenges, priorities, pain points, and friction points in someone's life, and you can offer resources to solve those things. But if you're not credible, it's going to go nowhere. And what's credibility? Credibility is really simply reliability and competence combined. So reliability, meaning when you say you're going to do something, can you be counted on to actually do it when you said you're going to do it, in the way in which you're going to do it, with the same level of expertise you said you can perform it at? And then the second part is competence. Do you actually have the skill set you said you had to be able to do that? This is where we want to make sure we never, ever, ever overpromise. In the world of the FBI, this was a critical thing that was very challenging to work through, because me as a case agent in the field, I was a front man doing all the recruiting of the confidential human sources, defector sources, and all these high-end things. My ability to take action on behalf of that human being and solve that problem needed to go through a lot of wickets. The process of giving someone cash for helping out required writing up a voucher, writing up a request, and justifying the amount of money, and its justification given the level of cooperation. Then it had to go through my supervisor for approval. He was considering all the other requests for cash payments from other case agents on the squad. Due to a limited budget, the government's and the Bureau's ability to pay human sources and defector sources is very limited. So if you have a lot of high-end sources providing quality information and you're going to your boss asking for money, but on any given day, your sources here and other sources are ranked higher, you can't have a promise. You need to double check with the boss. And here's a challenge. If you say I got to double check with my boss, they might ask, why am I dealing with you? Why don't I just go talk to your boss? It's an amazing challenge of maintaining credibility and reliability to demonstrate competence, showing you're the person that can be their problem solver in their lives for the critical challenges. Fascinating dance. And so how do you do it? One, you front load what you think that ask is going to be, so you can actually go in with an offer before there's an ask. During your preliminary conversations, your exploration, your deep dive of understanding who they are, you can kind of assess what you think those needs will be. So you can front load the request, get permission beforehand, get the boundaries of what you can offer before the ask even comes in. And then if they hit you with a request you haven't considered, you have to have what we call a preparation for what we call showstopper questions. we would do on every operation, part of our rehearsal, part of our training, part of our preparatory work for a recruitment operation was coming up with showstopper questions. And we do it during an interview as well. Showstopper questions are a set of questions we anticipate might be asked by the person we're engaging so that we're not fumbling for an answer. We have no confidence or competence in what we're doing. So we wanted to make sure that we were always prepared with a great answer just for them. If there was a request that came in, say we were blindsided by a request for compensation in some way, and I was worried about losing my credibility, my typical showstopper response would be, wow, you really asked a good question because I owe you a lot of time and resources and thoughtful consideration. Let me get back to you next time on that. If I got blindsided with any question at any time, I had a showstopper answer ready for that. Another one that was typical is like, are you following me? We typically have a lot of ways in which we gain information about the comings and goings of people, and we keep that information very solid and secure because just like we protect the relationship we have with you, we protect the relationship we have with other people as well. So how do you maintain credibility? You have reliability of you can actually do and perform what you say, and you have the competence and the skill set to do it. That is one of the bedrocks of being able to forge great trust. All right, here's the final question before I have two that I'm going to add on. That one came from Linda and one came from Jim. But before we get to Linda's and Jim's, let's hit this one. Robin, how do shared experiences build trust, and what's a story from my life? I tell you, one thing I learned in the Marine Corps is there's no greater bonder of human beings than shared suffering. You know, there's another great book I read. I can't remember exactly who the author was, but it's a really great and powerful statement that's very true. We don't remember average days. We either remember really challenging ones that sucked or really awesome ones. Anything that triggers a really high emotional response is what we remember. Shared experiences are part of that. When we have a shared experience, especially moving through a challenge together, it's a bonder of human beings. Every single confident human source I ever worked with became a close relationship. We did a lot of shared things together of critical national security interests. These are great human beings. It's not like working criminal work, dealing with a seedier part of society. These are high-end individuals with huge intelligence, academic backgrounds, successful careers and professions in life, willing to put a lot on the line to be patriots and do things for something greater than themselves. And so when you do big things with people like that, you are going to have a lot of shared experiences that build tremendous trust, and you maintain those relationships a long time. There's not an individual I ever worked with that I couldn't see today, walk around that corner, have a big smile come across my face and give them a big hug. It is just the way it is. I'm still in touch with many of them. One of the greatest things I experienced, as well as tragic, was a great bonder, and this is beyond what I did in the Marine Corps, and that was 9/11 in New York. I remember every single minute with every single person I was with during that experience being, right next to ground zero. I had an engine from the plane that hit the South Tower, landed about 30 feet from my car that day. When I went out to my car later that day to go home for the first shift I was on, I was literally a smoldering jet engine from me to the other end of my living room, and a cop standing right next to it. The whole place was so surreal. He's covered in dust. We're all covered in dust. There's tons of debris all over the place. I said, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm guarding this. I said, guarding it? And he goes, yeah, it's evidence. It was a jet engine. I said, I don't think anyone can run away with it. Just those shared moments. And then everyone I was with on the squad, us going out to Fresh Hills landfill where we were raking for what I called fingers and toes. You're looking for anything to give back a family member. The surreal moments of name hits off of airliners coming in. The interviews we did where we interviewed Saddam Hussein's dentist, who's telling us how he used to jump around all Embassy Road, and then also we have bombs going off in those areas. It was just crazy, the shared suffering and shared experiences you have with both individuals that were sources, individuals that you do these great things with, and then how's that translate to life when you're not trying to recruit spies or working through 9/11. So that's why we have office get-togethers. That's why we have traditions in the office. That's why we have parties and picnics and after hours get-togethers. All these things create bonding moments. You have shared experiences so that in a moment of strife and conflict potentially that might arise with someone, you can at least go back to and think in terms of, Yeah, so today things are going a little sideways, but I know him as a human being, as a father, as a mother, as a friend, as a colleague. They're a good person. Let's see what we can do to move through this. And so that's why it's really important to have those shared moments because those are the ones we're going to remember. We do not remember average days. Think back a year ago, think back last week. If it wasn't a standout moment, do you remember what you did between the hours that you got up and went to bed? Probably not, unless it was a standout moment of great challenge or joy. So I challenge you with this. Make every moment a moment you're going to remember by making a great moment of joy. All right, folks, we're nearing the end right now. And before I give you these two questions that came in from two of my followers and good friends, Jim and Linda, I want to remind everyone, if you have other questions that I'm not covering that you want answered, let me know. Reach out to me, post it on Facebook, post it on Twitter/X, post it on Instagram, post it anywhere you think I can find it. I'd love to answer your questions. This is about what I can deliver for you. This is hopefully me being an informer. So with that, let's get to what Linda and Jim gave me. First, let's start off with Linda because she wrote in first and said, how do you overcome self-focus? First of all, I think it's interesting because Linda seems like one of the most genuine, organically giving people I see in the virtual world, in the social networking world. So I find it interesting that she's asking about self-focus. I can't imagine it's for her. But self-focus is a challenge. But I want to also emphasize that I don't think it's necessary you have to overcome self-focus. With everything in life, everything's a dichotomy. It's okay to be self-focused to the extent of you have to have self-care. You cannot ignore yourself. You cannot inflict harshness or cruelty on yourself. You cannot shame yourself because it's about balancing the dichotomy. When I was growing up, I was very good at solving my problems, but that was self-focused. It wasn't detrimental, but it was a little self-focused. The dichotomy was out of balance. Learning and getting reps in solving and recognizing challenges, priorities, and pain points of others. So I could bring the dichotomy in balance. Jocko Willink and Leif Babin really exemplified this well in their book, The Dichotomy of Leadership, where they talk about everything in life's a dichotomy. And the yin and the yang is about the dichotomy of balance. I think the important thing, Linda, is to make sure that we have a balance of self versus others. It's just getting reps in identifying the challenges of others. If everyone can just take one more second a day or a pause to think to yourself, what's that person I'm about to engage with? What's important to them? Just do that one more time a day. Like throughout every day, we interact with numerous people, even if you only interact with one person, or maybe it's one person every couple of days. I don't care what your situation is. Before you engage the next time, here's a little exercise for everyone to do. Before you engage, ask yourself this simple question. What is the greatest challenge they are facing this week? And if you don't know it, then make that part of your goal at your next meeting, at your next encounter. Discover what's important to them. And how do you do that? It's simple. If you add this one little question, I've said it so many times, just go to any of my podcast episodes from Forged by Trust. I started out every episode with this one question. What was that spark and inspiration that inspired you to be where you are today? That is an easy way to get the focus off yourself and onto others. Be kind to yourself, give it a shot, and see how it turns out. And the next one from Jim. Vocabulary is essential for establishing, enhancing, and maintaining trust. He asks, what key vocabulary is essential for establishing, enhancing, and maintaining trust? Jim is the Jedi master of vocabulary and how to do all this. I'm trying to channel my inner Jim who knows the answers to all these things much deeper than I do. First of all, everything we've said so far is about how to shift that focus from ourselves to others by those 4 keys to communication: seeking the thoughts and opinions of others, talking in terms of their challenges, priorities, and pain points, validating them with active non-judgmental curiosity, empowering them with choices. Vocabulary, to keep it really, really simple, avoid I statements. Always focus on you, on you, on you. If you find yourself inspired to, after someone shares a thought, opinion, idea with you, a priority in their life, our natural reaction is to want to reciprocate with this anecdote and story of our own. And we initially were going to go to, I think this. I had a similar experience. I did this. If you can Get rid of it. Get rid of the I. Even if you want to share a story, you feel so compelled you can't overcome the need to share your own anecdote or story, reframe it from saying, I had a similar experience. You can say, hey, Jim, what do you think about this experience I had? I'm curious about your thoughts. You can shift that entire focus so you can still share that anecdote or story you think might be important or a way to make a connection, but you can make that story about them by asking their thought and opinion about it instead of saying, hey, here's what I think. One way to do that is eliminate I and shift that focus by making it a thought and opinion. And then the other thing I want to do is collective pronouns. I love collective pronouns, and just keep it open-ended. Just the vocabulary of eliminating I and asking, how did that come about? What do we need to do next? What's the hows, what's, whens, and whos, as Jim loves to say. That's what I'm always going to focus on because that keeps people's brains engaged. I always want to avoid the use of the word why. It can trigger people if they have an insecurity in a certain area and can come across as being judgy in some way. So I tend to avoid the word why. I try to go with what most of the time. Then I'm going to default to who, when, how. And then after they share a particular anecdote or story, what was next? Tell me more. What came next? All those things are easy vocabulary things to add. So there you go. Answer those two questions. Again, thanks to you two for sending it in. Appreciate it much. Wow. We covered a lot today about building and keeping trust, from active listening to nonverbal cues and shared experiences. I hope you're inspired to try these strategies in your own alliances. And next time, we're going to explore communicate, diving into the golden key to success. Remember, subscribe, drop your questions in the comments, or visit me at robindreeke.com to keep this conversation going. Thanks everyone for joining me. And until next time, be safe and take care of each other.